Hey guys, it's GHP, and welcome back to our comprehensive Set 3, the Dusk Road review. Today, we're going to look at all the time cards, so let's get started. First, we're going to talk about another Waystone. The last one we looked about, the Fire one, I basically explained that I think all of the Waystones should be played in a large number because they're often free to put in your deck. This one, just like others, is going to find a home. The additional part of this card, though, is the fact that it's great for the Life Force deck, but it's also really nice in a deck like Combre, Praxis. Well, Combre is the big one because you have Martial Irethord, but when you can attack and get this off Worldbearer Behemoth as well, you could just gain random bits of life that can help you steal games that you don't deserve to win. And let's be real, we all enjoy winning games that we have absolutely no business in winning. I do it all the time. Um, so I think this card's great. This card's going to see plenty of play. Basically every time deck I've built so far, this is in it as a 4 of. And I do not suspect that to change. And I think a lot of people are going to agree on this one. Next one. What the fuck is this? Azrai Praxis. When one of your units dies, discard top card of your deck. If this is at the bottom of your deck at the start of the game, play it. So, some people are calling this the worst card in Eternal. Um, it might be. It's one of the worst. It is a zero mana relic, which is really good in the Relic Matters decks, except the effect you get from this is obsolete. The unit dying and discarding a card is only so relevant. It's only one card we're talking about. That's not a lot. So, like, Sporefolk, not only do you get a body, you also get 5 cards. Most decks that care about putting cards in their graveyard want to put, like, their entire deck in the graveyard. Either means to the end wants to kill you. Decks with Sporefolk, besides means to the end, so like Reanimator, wants to get a critical mass of good cards in the graveyard to reanimate something and go like Vera, big threat. That's always great. This card doesn't mill enough cards for it to be useful. The bottom of your deck thing is a joke. There's probably an achievement for it because it's that hard to get, but it's completely random and the card is completely garbage. Apparently, LSV said there was a way to break this card. Someone break this card. I'll applaud you and never play the deck. But I think this card isn't going anywhere. Amarine Shoveler. So it's it's a 1 mana 0/1. Explorer, which is always relevant. Pay 2 and exhaust it. So you look at the top card. If it's a Sentinel or a Relic, you keep it and you draw it. Otherwise, you discard it. So this is really bad when you're looking for power, for example. So this is not like a Blind Storyteller, where you could just loot away whatever you want, or try to draw the power, for example. This is specifically for Sentinels or Relics. So, it is a scout effect every turn, but the cost of putting a 1 mana 0/1 in your deck that doesn't have a relevant effect until late game, because you want to hit your power early, and then you want to draw extra gas with this card, is just too weak to put in a deck, in my opinion. The Sentinels decks already have good draws, or a good card draw, like Worldbearer Behemoth if they play that one. Even though it's not a Sentinel, it's just a good card. They do play Heart of the Vault, things like that. They have enough card draw where they don't need this to facilitate it. Ancient Bauble. So this card is really deceiving. It's a 1 mana relic, which is relevant in a Relics Matters deck. Once per turn, you may pay a mana to gain a life. So this seems really shit. And then you play this card in Life Force, and you realize, I can just take 4 of the weaker cards out of my deck, throw this relic in that you can't really interact with very easily, and I have infinite Life Force triggers. So I don't have to have, oh, I drew Beckoning Lumen late into the game, I have no ways to trigger it, let's hold it in my hand. You can play Becky, activate this, and draw your card. Like, this facilitates a lot of huge board states too. It makes Catcher really easy, because you don't need a Temple Scribe or a Vera's Favor. You can play both in a turn, or you kind of just want to commit something that doesn't trigger this turn. Maybe you just want to play another Catra. Well, you can do that. I don't think this card has a home outside of Life Force, but I think this card is going in Life Force. I personally have it in 4 of my Life Force deck that I may have stole off, I believe, Asarius, but I think it's great there, and I've tweaked that deck a little, and this card is not coming out of it. Gumming Wisp. It's a 1 mana Woodwood, flying, so it's a Humbug with Nightfall. So Humbug is weak, because it's just a bad body. A Woodwood Flyer is not that relevant. This is definitely better than that. So this card probably isn't constructed playable, but I'm going to give you a theory on where it could be. This could go into an aggressive Praxis tokens deck. So it curves out at 5 maybe. You're playing rallies. You're playing probably Jack at top end. You just want more critical mass, and this draws you a card. Maybe this slots into that deck. Like, I'm not saying this card's good, and I have a feeling it's not good enough for that deck, but I haven't tried the deck. But it is a 1 mana cycle effect for both players, and you end up getting a body. And when you play this card with Obelisk, it's good with Rally. You attack with Jack. Like, maybe this is solid enough for that deck. I'm not claiming the card's great, but maybe in that one specific Obelisk-themed aggressive deck, it's good. I say aggressive because the other versions can play something like Vault of the Praxis as ways to draw cards where it's not that desperate for card draw, where this card just wouldn't be able to fit in that deck. Hesitate. So it's 1 mana, negate an enemy spell and put it into the enemy hand. For those of you who've ever played Magic, this is Remand, except it doesn't draw a card. Now, just gonna point this out. Remand's 2 mana. But I've had people ask me my thoughts on Magic cards, so I'm gonna point this out. I think Remand's a pretty weak card unless you're in a tempo deck. And that's where this is meant to be played, is you play this in a really aggressive time-based deck. And then you bounce their Harsh Rule, for example. The problem is if you're playing a time-based deck, so if you play Time Justice, you got Stand Together. If you play Time Primal, so Elysian, you get Unseal / Backlash / Daring Pioneer. In Fire, you get nothing for this effect that I can think of, and in Shadow, you can get Sabotage. So you already have this type of effect. But this card is really bad if, say, your opponent torches. You don't want about to torch, they just replay it. It's not good against Lightning Storm, same reason. There isn't that aggressive of a time deck right now that could ever use this card. And I just think this card is worse than other things we already have to do a negating a spell effect. Which is why I just think this card's too bad to see constructed play. If there is a very, very aggressive time-based deck at some point, maybe it's mono time. Maybe this card is okay, because you want some sort of Harsh Rule protection, and if you draw it, and you're already on the board super heavily, bouncing that Harsh Rule might be enough to win you the game. But you need to be playing an aggressive enough deck, in my opinion, that this bouncing a Harsh Rule wins you the game on turn 5. Otherwise, I don't think this card has much of a purpose. Our next card. So it's a 1 mana 1/1 with Endurance. That's shit. It is an Explorer. If you're playing a Relic, it's a 1 mana 3/3 Endurance, which is fucking great. This card is garbage outside of a deck that's trying to play a bunch of Relics. So, for example, there's multiple Sentinels in this deck that if you have a Relic, get bigger. If you're playing that deck, I think this card's an easy 4 of because it's an aggressive body. Presuming you're building that aggressively and not like super top end because it's a Praxis deck. If you're playing this half aggressively, a 1 mana 3/3 Endurance is going in my deck all the time. That deck kind of folds to removal and silence, but I think this card is good enough in that deck where it's just such a good body for the cost. It also blocks really well. So, for example, you play this on turn 1. Your opponent plays Oni Ronin. You go turn 2, Power Stone. You have a 3/3 attacking into their Oni Ronin that can block their Oni Ronin. It's just, that's a pretty good scenario. But it's just a thought. And that is, that's kind of the nuts with this card. And then into, like, Titan or the format of 7/7 we'll talk about in, like, 4 days. But this card's great in the decks that actually want to be aggressive with Relics. Telluria's Invention, I think, is one of the weaker inventions, but let's look at it. So it's fast spell, 1 mana, gain 3. That's definitely not worth a spell. Put one of your explorers or sentinels back into your hand. So that's actually pretty good because, like, Safe Return's not a bad card. Um, Now this doesn't buff it, but it is 1 mana. Sorry, they're both 1 mana. You could do brain cells. Uh, it is one color, which is important. If you're playing, you'd obviously play this in Explorers or Sentinels deck, so it bounces one of your dudes if need it from removal. And then silence an attacking enemy unit normally isn't that relevant. There's already good time silences or removal, so I don't think that effect is that good. I don't think the Game 3 or Silence effect is good enough for a card, which is why I don't think the second effect, which is the best effect on this card, makes it playable. I think the card is just too low value. It's really a 1, maybe 1.5 mode card where sometimes silencing is relevant. But I don't think it's overly relevant for a Sentinels deck currently. So that's why I'm going to say this card's not good. Here's a good card. We already have Predator's Instinct, which saw lots of play before Xenon Initiation came out. If you're playing a Dinosaurs deck, so let's compare it to Predator's Instinct. If you don't play it on a Dinosaur, it's Predator's Instinct plus Nightfall. I think that's probably better than Predator's Instinct. So if you play this on a Dinosaur, it's Xenon Initiation with Nightfall for 1 mana. I think this card is bonkers in the Dinosaurs deck. Xenon Initiation doesn't see play anymore because, Predator's Instinct doesn't see play because Xenon Initiation's better. So I think this card always sees play in a Dinosaurs deck, but I think every Dinosaurs deck plays this as a 4 because it's an excellent removal spell. It draws you cards, which that deck sometimes struggles for. It buffs your dudes, and it's cheap as hell. Your removal in those decks kind of suck, especially if you're in the Elysian version, where you only really have Permafrost or, like, killer effects. This is better than other killer effects in that deck. So I think this card is really good in the Dinosaurs Matters decks. Accelerated Impact. 2 mana, your units get +1/+1 and deal their health and battle damage to their attack this turn. So I think this card's unplayable. So the reason for it is, yes, 2 mana +1/+1. We already have that card in Synchronized Strike. It's not very good. Dealing your health and battle damage is okay. Now, this is a card in Draft that's probably okay because there's a lot of the Sentinels have big butts, and a lot of just the time cards in general have big butts. Or you could, your 6 mana 3/6 Endurance is actually a 7/7 this turn when it attacks. That's powerful, but I think this card is too low impact. I know it's, we could say it's an accelerated rate, but it's not good enough for Constructed in my opinion, where all the time cards already just have big butts and big attack, because that's what time decks are. As for Directions, I think is the worst card in Eternal. It's 2 mana to Scout. That's not worth a card. Scout is worth like 0.5 mana, in my opinion. And it's worth 0.5 of a card. So when you attack with 2 or more Explorers, you could draw this from your Void. First, most of the Explorer decks are actually just there to be Dinosaurs or Sentinels bitch, and help you play those cards because they synergize. You don't actually play that many Explorers in your decks, which means actually triggering this is incredibly hard. But I'm not paying 2 mana to Scout. I'd have to attack with 2 more Explorers like 45 times before I'm getting value. Because pay 2 to Scout is not good. And a lot of the times, this is actually just pay 2 to Scout, and then once. You never get it back. Which is why I think this card is completely garbage, and maybe the worst card in the game. Cryptic Etchings. It's a really interesting relic. So it's 2 mana, do nothing. But once per turn, you may pay 2 to Scout. So, in my opinion, this card is not good enough for a Relics Matters deck. There's a lot of other good relics, but 2 mana do nothing is not good, and then paying 2 mana to Scout every turn, although mana dumps are good, I don't think this is the mana dump you want in your life right now. This card, I've seen a lot of people even cutting from draft decks to tell you how good it is. Although I think that might be slightly wrong. I think this card is just not playable and constructed. It's just way too slow to get any value out of it, and you basically never run to draw it. Disjunction. So this is Decay, -1 mana, plus in value. Great card. Draw detachment for your Void, powerful. You're playing your weapon sticks, draw whatever weapon you want. Kill an enemy attachment, so you still have the kill effect. It gave Time a better answer than Decay, and Decay was already like Tournament and Sideboard playable, and some decks played the main. I think this card is definitely main deckable in, say, the Time version of Armory, or any sort of Time Relic Matters deck, such as the TJP All Spells deck. This card is definitely playable in to get your weapon back. I think this card's great. I think the decks that really want the decks that needed an effect like this is exactly what they wanted. It's so cheap. It's a fast spell. The card's going to see lots of play in those decks, and it's the type of card that just makes those decks more consistent and just better. Nocturnal Creeper is a card I'm not a fan of in Constructed, but I think is insane in Draft. So it's a 2-mana 2/1 with Deadly. We already have Sand Viper. This one cycles for both players, though. It has Nightfall. So I think this card is worse than Sand Viper because Sand Viper can become a 3/4. So it can actually become a threat you have to deal with. This also dies to Vera's Favor, which is a really big deal in Constructed right now. Which it's also worse than Blistering Wasp in my opinion. And both Blistering Wasp and Sand Viper don't really see much play. Blistering does in like big Xenon, but that's it. I think this card's not really playable because of the cards around it. It's weaker than, and it just dies to everything. Being a 2-mana 2/1 that has Nightfall isn't really a selling point for me. I'd just rather play Temple Sky if I wanted a 2-drop that cycled. And a lot of the Time decks have other good 2-drops, like I believe the next card we're looking at. I bow down to Trailmaker. Initiative Sands, get out of my deck. This card is amazing. This is one of the best cards in the set. It's a 2-mana 2/1. We just explained. These do die very easily. It's a +1 maximum power. Great. Ramping's really important in like Praxis and other decks like that. Being an Explorer, great. Summon to gain an influence of your choice. So if this guy dies, you keep your influence. So if you're trying to play Heart of the Vault, or even like World Bearer Behemoth, let's even go easier. This comes down, makes it so you basically can always cast whatever you want, and it also ramps you towards that. This card is amazing in any ramp deck. It probably is going to be played as a 4 in all of them, especially ones with anything hard to cast, like Heart of the Vault. After playing this card a lot in both Draft and Constructed, I'm beyond impressed with it. And I think a lot of people are too. I think alongside with Power Stone and Initiative Sands probably gets cut from basically most ramp decks, because you don't want too much ramp. And I just think this card is excellent and going to see shit tons of play in any deck that wants to go big. Bang Sarasar. 3-mana 2/2 Nightfall. That's a bad body. Nightfall doesn't help. When you draw a card, this guy gets +1/+1 this turn. So it's on your turn. On its worst day, it's a 3-mana 3/3. The turn after you play it, it's a 3-mana 4/4. A 3-mana 4/4 is okay and constructed. That's how good of the card quality we have her. This is clearly a card built for Draft, where it's amazing in Draft, but that's where it's going to stay. Even though it's a dinosaur, it's competing with a lot of good cards at 3, and I don't think, even though it cantrips for both players, I don't think it's anywhere near powerful enough to see constructed play. Dig Site. 3 mana. When you play a Sentinel, your Explorers get +1/+ for this turn. And when you play it, you may bounce a unit or relic into its owner's hand. So, I think this card's really bad. When you play a Sentinel, your Explorers get bigger. That's not relevant enough because a lot of the Explorers have shit bodies, and they just want you to, they just want you to use them for value, not for attacking. They're not built to attack with. So, I don't think that play a Sentinel effect is overly relevant. It coming down and bouncing something could be nice, but I don't think it's worth 3 mana. even though it's a relic, which could matter, I just don't think this card's good enough for constructed. Last Light of Fusion. 3 mana, Nightfall, give 2 units +1/+1. Give 2 units +1/+1 is worth like 1.5 mana, in my opinion. Nightfall is not worth 1.5 mana, so this card is just not worth its cost in mana, in my opinion, which tends to just make your card unplayable. If this card was 2 mana, I still don't think it would be great because it's a slow speed spell, but it is a permanent buff. But because of its mana cost, I think this card's just never going to be considered for people's decks. Lunar Magus is a card I think a lot of people have slept on. A 3 mana 2/4 is already pretty good. So if you want to think about it this way, if you compare it to Healer, it has 1 less health potentially, except Combat Healer's health can go around. So in a non-Combat deck, you get a Combat Healer effect because it gains you life. So you summon it, Nightfall. So both players are going to draw a card. Okay, that's pretty bad against Aggro sometimes, but it's already a decent butt to block. When you start your turn at night, you gain 4 health. So really, when you start your turn at night, gain 3 health because you're going to mitigate the 1 damage from night. This guy is a Combat Healer style card. If you ever play like 2 of this card against like any sort of if you stick 2 of these against any sort of aggro deck, they lose because you just gain, 7, 8, whatever health a turn. Like at least off the Nightfalls. I think this card goes right into Xenon Life Force. I think this is just a great card for that deck. It's a good body. It's a good effect. It draws you a card which that deck sometimes struggles with. I think this card's excellent. I've actually played decks like one of my Combat lists. I don't play any Temple Scribes in it, and instead I play 4 of these because they do similar effects, and I'm trying to skip turn 2 with Power Stone Find the Way. I think this card's going to see a ton of play. I think some people are just sleeping on it right now, but I think the card's excellent. Moondial. So it's a 3 mana relic that has Nightfall. That's really bad. Once per turn, you may pay 5 and draw a card. So this is just a mana dump is the idea. You get really late game, you play this. For turn, you pay 5 because you're at like 14 mana. And, you should bury your opponent eventually. While this is true, it's such a weak draw against anything that's not like a control mirror. Or if you're already winning the game. I think this card isn't good. I've seen some people play it in the TJP Spells deck as like a one-of, which I think it's okay there. Just as, that deck, often it'll be ready to win the game and it can't find a channel or something. This is an okay thing to be doing with your mana every turn. I think outside of a deck like that, where it's just trying to dig to, 1 or 2 copies of a card in the deck, I think this card's really bad. I won't see any play outside of that. In that deck, though, I think it's a okay one-of. So, this card, 3 mana 2/2s are bad. But the ultimate is you play a 4/4. So it can be a 3 mana 6/6 worth of stats, which is pretty powerful. The problem with this card, though, is you need to trigger the Life Force on this card, or gain a life, whatever we're going to call it. Because of that, I think this card is just too weak. I saw a lot of people try it in Xenon Life Force, and I just don't think that deck has room. It already has multiple good 3-drops in Aeon and card I'm forgetting the name of, Lunar Magus. And I just don't think this card's good enough for that deck. And that's the only deck that could want a card like this, which is why I'm just going to say I don't think this card's going to see play. Season Spelunker. So it's a 3 mana 3/3, which is fine, and it's an Explorer, which is relevant in, say, Praxis. It's a 3 mana 4/4 when you have a Relic, which is quite good. And you can pay 5 to play a Power Stone. So you pay 5, it buffs this guy by 1 if you don't have a Relic. It gets you a Relic, it also ramps you. I think this card's excellent. The problem is it's competing with other cards. Like, say, the Sentinel deck. Maybe it can fit this card. But I actually want to try this card in an aggressively slanted Relics Matter show, because this is a 3 mana 4/4, and if you're lacking a Relic, it also gets you that Relic to buff your team. I think this card's quite good in that type of deck. I don't think you play this card in, say, just regular big Praxis. I think there's just too many other good cards and other ramp cards and cards like Titan that you're still trying to fit in that deck, where I don't think it has room. But I think this card could go in more of an aggressively slanted Relic Matters deck because it is quite good. Alright. Serenite Excavator. So it's a 1 mana. Sorry. Why am I saying wrong mana cost when I look at the attack? 3 mana, 1/2 flyer. That's a really shit stat line. It's an Explorer, and if you have a Sentinel, it's a 3 mana 2/3. A 3 mana 2/3 flyer does not make my deck. Not with the quality of cards we have in Eternal. That's why this card's not playable. It's worse than other Explorers if you want an Explorer's Matter synergy. You're already playing cards like Titan as well with Sentinels because that's a Sentinel. So I just don't think this card's playable. I think it's way too weak of a stat line, and it doesn't really do enough to impact the game. And if you don't have a Sentinel, this card just does nothing. 3 mana 1/2, get out of here. Aegis Sentinel. 4 mana 3/5. So this card's just a draft card. Let's just be completely honest. It's just way worse than cards like Sandstorm Titan, Crimson Fireball. I'm sure there are other 4-drops. Great Parliament. You know, I'm thinking Praxis because that's where Sentinel wants to be. This is just worse than other 4-drops, and there's tons of good 4-drops out there. Like, this is simply worse than Diogo. Being double time is also kind of a slap in the face. But most of the time, you don't just play bodies in Eternal. You want text on all your cards. Very few cards in this game you play that don't have text on them. Although you could say a card like, for example, Knife Jack. Technically it has text on it. It deals you 2. But it doesn't actually have an effect. But that's a way overstated 1-drop as a 1 mana 2/2. I don't think this card's constructed playable. There's other Sentinels that are good too if you're looking to be the Sentinels Matters deck. Fantastic Revelation. Nightfall. Play all the power cards for your hand to deplete it. How do I break this card? I don't think this card is good, but one of you smart people out there, is going to sit down and break this card. I know it. Of course, we could live the dream of, say, you have Mystica set it out. For some reason, you have shit tons of power. Maybe you flood it out really hard. You play this, you draw 6 cards or whatever. Sure. Or you're playing and you're trying to ramp to Voda combo. Maybe. The idea I want to try is play this in one of those 50 power decks. You play this, and then you just have, like, I don't know, some big top end. Maybe you have Great Parliament or something. So you just have shit tons of power in your hand. You play this, and you put, like, 8 power in play. The next turn you make, like, more than 4 owls. And, yeah, like, I think this card's abusable. I don't think it's great, but I think this card might find a niche home in some deck. Because it is just a very powerful card. The question is, where do you put it? Gearmaster. This card's shit. So, it is a Sentinel draw cards, but that deck already has card draw. It's also such a bad body, and if it gets silenced, it doesn't do anything. Also, it doesn't draw a card when you play it. So, if you play this at 4, you played a 4-mana 2/2. And I think every deck in the world at this point laughs at that. It takes, like, 3 Sentinels to make this card worth its cost to play, and then you still put a 4-mana 2/2 in your deck. So if you're not drawing Sentinels, or if you draw this off the top and you'll have a Sentinel, this card's just not good. I don't think this card's ever going to see play. The Sentinel deck just doesn't need it. Hitting Spike Tower is a draft card, so it's a 4-mana 4/2 dinosaur. That's just why I understand it. Like, this card's worse than a Rakdodon. Overwhelm doesn't help, and when you play another dinosaur gain a health, there's other ways to gain health, and if you're playing a card to try to gain health in a time deck, play Amber Waystone, because that's free. This is actually being put in your deck, and you're going to draw these instead of real cards. So I don't think this card's anywhere near playable. This card, maybe one day. It's a 4-mana 4/5, which is already good. The summon is bounce one of your other units into your hand, which could actually be good. So I think this card might see play one day. It's just, the problem is it's competing with so many other good 4-drops, and it's strictly, like, it's worse than Titan. We know that. The question is it worse than Displacer? Because Displacer doesn't see a lot of play. If this is worse than Displacer, the thing about Displacer is it hits your opponent's dudes. This one is just a decent static dude that could bounce. I'm just gonna name something like Tempo Scribe, where yeah, you can now replay it and draw another card. That's okay, but you could do that with Displacer too, and have flexibility. I think this is worse than Displacer, and if it's worse than Displacer, which is a card that doesn't see much play, I don't think this card's gonna see play. I just kind of talked myself into this one. I'm gonna be completely honest. I didn't really have an opinion on this card. Lost of the Mist. So Teleport is a fast spell that bounces something. For either player. This one is 4 mana, bounce an enemy unit, and it costs increased by 2. Well, I don't want to increase the cost to teleport by 2 and make it slow in order to make it so yours costs 2 more. That's not worth it at all. And teleport doesn't see any constructed play. Absolutely unplayable. Garbage card. Lunar Reclaimer. It's one of my favorite cards in the game. It's a 4 mana 4/4, which is kind of bad. When it enters the battlefield, you shuffle a void of your choice into its owner's deck. So you can come down and hose a graveyard deck, hose a bunch of tokens or something bad that your opponent has in their void, or you can put your void back in and draw all your gas, depending on what type of deck you're playing. In Tube, put 4 copies of this card in your deck. So this card makes it so you can't deck out, which is relevant. This card fucks up like graveyard shenanigans and things like that. I'm just gonna say it. I think this card's really powerful. The question is, where's it going? I want to play a deck that literally plays 4 of these, and that's it when it comes to ways to win the game. And you deck your opponent. I want to do it. Not saying it's good. This card could also be used to say the Chalice Control Mirror, where sometimes you gotta stop drawing cards so you don't deck yourself. Well, you just play like one of these and you don't deck yourself anymore. Or you probably play more than one, but shuffling your void back in is still fine. Draw extra channels. I think this card is excellent. The question is, where's it going? Because the effect is way too powerful for this card to just be obsolete. This card's good enough to see constructed play for sure. 4 mana 5/2, increase the cost of each spell in the enemy hand by 1. I think this card's not good, so 4 mana 5/2 is bad, even though it's a dinosaur. A lot of decks, the spells are pretty cheap that they want to play. Also, this card could just not hit anything. If this card hits nothing, this card's absolutely abysmal. If this card hits something, often it doesn't matter enough. This isn't like casting slow, which slow sometimes comes down. And for example, I'll hit your Vera. Would you like to get 16 power to cast your Vera? Like, I think this card's just too weak to see constructed play. It's worse than slow. It's probably worse than Time Weaver. Both those cards see some constructed play, but not a lot. And I think this card is just way worse than those cards. So I don't think this card's very good. 5 mana, gain 8 life, Nightfall. Wow, I can't believe I'm about to say this out loud. This card is constructed playable. I'm so ashamed of myself to say that, but it's not very constructed playable, but it's playable as like a one-of in like a Moments of Creation deck. Because sometimes that deck just loses to burn spells. It can beat everything else. Sometimes just having this one-of way to gain 8 life is enough to win you a game. And the Nightfall, meaning it digs you deeper, is okay. The contradiction to that is you have Amber Waystone. But if you're playing 3-color Moment, maybe. I don't think this card's good. But I think it could see play. I've seen people playing it, which is why I'm saying it. And it hasn't been bad, in my opinion, when they've played it. I don't think it's stellar because any card that just gains you life is pretty weak normally. And it's not like the Life Force deck wants it because they have way cheaper ways to get effects like this. But I don't think the card is awful and might see one-of play. So it's a 5 mana 3/3, but if you have a dinosaur, it's a 5 mana 6/6. This card isn't constructed playable because World Bearer Behemoth exists. And if you're going to play a 5-drop dinosaur, you're going to play World Bearer Behemoth, which is a 5 mana 6/7 without any conditions attached to it. That's kind of just the issue with this card, where it's just kind of too weak compared to other cards of the game. A 5 mana 6/6 is quite good in other card games, for example. But this game just has a lot of push stat cards, especially in time. Well, I don't think this card's seeing any play. Frenzied Omnivore is a card I'm not convinced is good or bad. I don't think this card competes with Cardosaur. I think this card is looking to be Cardosaur number 6 or 7 when you don't play Xenon Initiation for whatever reason. I don't like this card except in mono time. So a viewer on stream recently sent me a mono time list, and it played this, no Dawnwalkers, because it wasn't easy to trigger Dawnwalker in that deck, and no Xenon Initiations. It just played 4 Cardosaurs and some number of this. This card growing is pretty good. Discarding a card kinda sucks, but it's okay if you're flooding or you need to kill something desperately. I don't think this card is unplayable. I think it's gonna find a home and it's probably a mono time. Besides that, I just don't like it because you don't want more than 4 Cardosaurs in a lot of decks. And the body on this is pretty weak. But I think this card is okay, and it's gonna see some play, probably just mono time. But it is a card that exists and is okay. Oh my god, how many cards do we have left? Alright. 5 mana 4/6. Summon. Play a Sandbind on an enemy unit with flying. Sandbind, the cursed unit can't fly. This card's not playable because 5 drops are already bigger than this, and Sandbind's not that good. Except Sandstorm Titan, but that's because it also comes with a big boy and it works on everything. That's why this card's not playable. Although it's a nice effect, I just don't think this card is good enough. There's not enough, mono flyers decks right now to make this card playable. Stirring Sand. So it's 5 mana, reanimate a Sentinel. And you can pay 2 and exhaust a Explorer to do an additional one. So I don't think this card's good in, say, Praxis as a reanimation spell, because that's not needed. I want to try this card, and I think the home it could be is Xenon Reanimator, because one of the biggest issues with Reanimator decks is you only have Grasping at Shadows. So you can play this card and Grasping at Shadows, and you can put the biggest Sentinels you can in your Void. Like Nova Quake. I don't think it's great. I think this card's got to see some play in some deck that can break it, and it's probably a Xenon style, or maybe Xenon, so Mardu if you play Magic, or Xenon plus Fire Reanimator, so then you can start hard casting cards like Heart of the Vault too, or just ramping them. Worldbearer Behemoth. Well, this card's completely unplayable. Let's move on. That's the wrong card. Invoke the Waystone. 6 mana. Discard the top 4 cards of your deck. Okay? Then play the next one. And then you draw a copy of this in your hand that costs 1 more. This card's really bad. Because it's just so much mana. And you could easily just hit a power. I guess the idea is you get like 40 mana and you play this like 5 times in a turn. I don't even know if that math works out. I think so. But no, it doesn't. I'm doing this in my head now. I don't think I have enough power. Then if I cast it 5 times in a turn, it costs... I'm doing math on camera. 27, then 8... Wait. So it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's 13, 21... So it's 40 mana, cast 5 times. Quick maths, boys. I don't think this card's playable. I think there's already good payout for having like 40 mana. Like Talir is just better than this effect in my opinion. So that's why I'm going to say it's not playable. Let's actually review Worldbearer Behemoth. 5 mana 6/7 Overwhelm is already great. It's a dinosaur, which is great. When it attacks, play a random power from your deck that increases ability by 1. So, for those of you who haven't, had that moment in Eternal where you're like, I think I might have an erection, I'm going to tell you how to quickly go get one, just in case. What you do is you go, turn 5 Martial Ironthorn. Play a power, whatever. Turn 6, play a Mystic Ascendant. Or, I'm not going to go with the turn thing. Let's try this again. What you do is you get Martial Ironthorn, Mystic Ascendant, and this card in play, you attack. So, the first attack puts 2 power in play for you, and you draw 2 cards. The next one's 4. The next one is 8. Or, the next one's 6, isn't it, Jerry? Yes, 6. That's a ridiculously good feeling. I'm gonna tackle my 5 mana 6/7. I'm gonna ramp by a lot. Oh, I'm also gonna draw some cards. Whoops, I win. This card's great. It goes in all the big time decks because it's just a huge body. It attacks through Titan. It attacks through Hard the Vault. It goes great with Titan and Hard the Vault. It's great with Killer. This card is just one of the best cards in the set, and it was the first card I crafted. And I just think the card is absurd, and this card's going to see play for a very, very long time. 6 mana, 2/5. Ambush. That's bad. Fate. You see the top card of each deck this turn. So the turn you draw it, you see the next card you're drawing, and you see what your opponent's drawing next turn. I think this card's really bad because its stat line is so bad. Ambush isn't that relevant. The Fate is not overly relevant. You can easily, well, not easily. Once you know the game well enough, you can often just read your opponent's hands at some points. So I just don't think this card's very good, and it's not going to see play. 6 mana, 3/6 endurance. If you have an Explorer, draw a card. Too bad of a stat line to see play. Endurance isn't overly relevant. It's worse than cards like Titan, Hard the Vault, Dinosaur that we just looked at. Although it's a nice Sentinel, the Sentinel deck just can do way better than this. 6 mana, 6/8. That's not bad. That's actually really big. Your cards can't be stolen while Tomb Protector is ready. So what is stolen? We have Madness. We have Fountain Bloodcaster, ? We have Subvert. We have Pilfer. All that stuff as a stolen. Most of those cards don't see much play. So I just don't think this card's very good. Although it's a nice body and stuff, the effect is not that relevant, and I would not play a 6 mana 6/7 vanilla in the current state of Eternal, which is why I don't think this card's relevant. If, and I mean if, say Stonescar Sacrifice, which is turning into Grenadins at this rate, becomes very, very popular, this card's not awful to play around Madness, but then you just kill this with the Combust instead. But, like, it's not an awful card, I just don't think it's going to see a lot of play. 7 mana 7/6 if you have a Dinosaur charge. When it attacks, kill an enemy attachment. I think this card's solid for a Dinosaur. I would play a 7 mana 7/6 charge in a lot of the Dinosaur's decks. It also gives them relic removal because the Dinosaur decks are often more of a Elysian style deck where they don't really have any good relic removal besides Disjunction. And I don't want to main deck Disjunction unless I'm playing my own weapons or relics. I think this card's playable as like a one-of. Definitely Dinosaur sideboard if Dinosaurs are good enough for tournaments though, because there's lots of relics. I think this card's solid. I gotta see some play in the Dinosaurs decks. Hello! 7 mana 7/7. At the start of your turn, gain the power you didn't spend last turn. So, that's weird. That's all I have to say. That's weird. The ultimate, pay 33, which is a fuck ton. They give this dude +7/+7 and over 1, so it's a 14/14. Then take an extra turn. I've not played against Taliyar yet, but I think it's a really powerful card. I think this card's only real home is a deck like Voda Combo though, where it's trying to go so big. So that deck sometimes floods out. And this is like a 4th copy of Martial Ironthorn. I think this card's powerful. I don't think it sees play at any like the regular big time decks. But I think this card's good enough to see play in Voda Combo. Just as another Ironthorn style effect. And this also can just let you play big Parliaments, for example. I think she's good enough there. I don't think she's good enough in a lot of other cases that people were thinking of when they first saw her. Because she is powerful. I also am curious to see how people are going to break this card. You could definitely OTK peel with things like Flame Blast. Which I'm sure some people have already tried and just haven't seen it yet. So I think the card's cool. I think it's more of a card that Brewers are going to toy with. I don't think it's really a tournament deck card, but I think it's a really fun card that's going to see play on ladder a lot. I could see play in Voda Combo. Maybe it sees sideboard play in decks like Big Cumbre as like a one-of for the control matches and stuff, where you could just use your extra power, You can use the ultimate, things like that. Dinosaur Stampede is fucking abysmal. It's an 8 mana spell that buffs your dinosaurs. Buddy, please eat an obelisk! This card's really bad. It's also only this turn. You also need like multiple dinosaurs. Like, sure, if I have 4 dinosaurs, I get plus 16, plus 16. Dinos are already bigger than most things. You don't need it. Play Crystallize and actually win the game instead of just get chump blocked. 8 mana, 4/5 Bond, Sentinel. So this is like a 4 or 5 drop. And 2 and play 3 1/1s. I don't think, let's say a 5 mana 4 or 5 that when it dies, play 3 1/1 Explorers is good enough for the Sentinels deck. I just simply don't. I think it's too weak of a Bond card. I think most Bond cards are pretty weak. And I just don't think this card's anywhere near constructed playable. Temporal Distortion is a breakable card. I've played it in the TJP spells deck. It can do some real things. Your spells are fast. Okay. That's really relevant, honestly. At the start of the enemy turn, replenish your power. That is really powerful. So what you could do with this card is, say you play it on 8, you start your opponent's turn, with 8 mana, you play Channel the Tempest on their turn. Or on your turn, you play Power Stone. Now you ramp to it, and on your opponent's turn, you have that power. It really lets you play with, like, infinite mana, so to say, on turns, which is insanely powerful. And it also just helps facilitate making sure cards like Harsher are better. As your opponent has charge threats, you can Harsher them. Your opponent puts a weapon or something, you can vanquish it. Things like that. Ice cards, good as like a 1 or 2 of in a spells matters deck, most likely. I don't think it's, a broken card or anything like that. It's a powerful card that gets better over time, though. So stay tuned in future sets. 9 mana, 7/9 Overwhelm. That's one of the biggest bodies in the game. Keep that in mind. When it hits the enemy player, draw a card with 6 or more from your void and reduce its cost by 6. So this was built to go in, say, a deck with Heart of the Vault. I think this card's like a one of potentially in a big time deck like Praxis that has just mono rampant and big stuff. The problem is it's completed with cards like the Great Clan Titan, which I think is better than this. I do think the Infiltrate style effect is very powerful on this card. I just don't think this card is good enough to compete with other time cards right now. I think it's worse than Great Clan Titan, and Great Clan Titan is never going to be a 4 in Praxis, in my opinion. So I think this card's powerful. I just think there's other cards that are better than it. But I think this card could be breakable, and what I want to actually do is I think this is one of the best Sentinel payoff in the Reanimator deck. You put this in play, you hit, you draw some random crap in your void. I don't know. How about get back Vera, play her for 2 mana, and now play something else. Ice card has potential, I just don't think it has potential in like the tier 1 decks. 9 mana 7/8 Sentinel with Bond is worse than cards like Colossus. The Bond, sure, it's a big body, but that's all. Like, this card isn't getting you value. It's just a big body that you had to, lose tempo on to play. It's more like a 6 drop, or maybe a 5 drop. But sure, if you go Titan and then play this, you got a big board. But I don't think this card gives you enough value to put a card like this in your deck when this could just be the 9 mana 7/8 Overwhelm, which is really bad. I think on its good days, it's solid. The problem is there's a lot of times where this card is just not going to get bonded, and in that case, it's really bad. 10 mana 6/6 Bond. When it attacks, play a 3/3 dinosaur with Overwhelm. I think it's the same problems with the last card where, although it's a nice, dinosaur and stuff, it's just too, it's awful as a 10 drop. It's solid as like a 5 drop. 5 mana 6/6 that when it attacks get a 3/3, that's pretty good. But my concern is the amount of times where this is not going to be a 5 or a 6 drop. That's where my concern about this card is. That's why I don't think it's playable, because the dinosaur decks don't really want to take a risk like this card. Also, it doesn't do anything the turn it enters, just like the 9 drop we just looked at, and that's a concern when you're playing a tempo negative card like all the Bond cards are. I don't think it's playable. You are a big boy. 16 mana for a 10/11 Sentinel. Bond. When you bond it, silence each enemy unit, bounce them into your hand, bounce them into the enemy hand, then draw a card for each relic you have. That's a lot of text. This card's powerful. So if you play a really big Sentinels deck, this card I think is playable as like a one of, because when you play it, it's like playing Crystallize, and the Praxis decks do need a way to break board stalls. But like, we do have the 6-mana 6/5 flyer we talked about in our fire review that exhausts all non-flyers. I think that card's probably good enough to do this job. When this gets rotted in your hand, you want to cry. But I don't think this card is bad. I think it's like one of playable in a Sentinels deck. But I don't think you need to go this big in those decks. You have cards like Novaquake Titan. That's not the card I'm looking for. Definitely not. The Great Quinn Titan. This is Novaquake Titan, Jerry. Wow, we've been talking for like, what, 50 minutes? That explains. So, this card is playable as a one-of maybe, but I just don't think you need to go this high on the curve. The card is obviously like a brewer's dream, and for those people who want to brew with this, go ahead. It'll be fun. The fact that you have to bond it means it's not good for the Reanimator deck, but that's fine. So, that's the last card I want to look at today. I want to say thank you guys all for watching. My voice is very clearly going, so I'm not recording the Justice one now. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.